I've spent most of my weekend outside doing garden stuff and I am tired now. I am newly cleansed and fresh and squeaky clean and very damp, and sometimes I care a lot what I look like when I'm filming. Most of the time, however, I don't give a shiitake, and that would be one of those days. So I'm going to start wrapping up all the things that I read in April. Well, almost everything, because I think I did a weekly wrap up at the beginning of the month, but with everything else going on, I haven't made much booktube content and I haven't talked about what I've been reading for most of the month. And it's been a really great and very fun reading month. I banned myself from reading library books completely. I haven't set foot in a library in about 30 days, which is insane because I usually go about twice a week. I will be reading library books again in May because I have some things for awards and stuff that I need to read before June, but then I'll probably be back to reading just books that I own again in June. And if my schedule goes the way that I hope it will, this will put a big dent in my physical TBR by the end of the year, which is what I'm hoping for. I'm going to talk about these in 5-book batches just to make filming this a bit manageable. I'm doing this later in the day than I usually would, and I'm going to run out of time and stamina eventually, so we'll do these in chunks. The first one is Monster Portraits, which is written by Sofia Samatar and heavily illustrated by her brother Del Samatar. I would most liken this to a poetry collection, specifically prose poetry, modern poetry that looks like paragraphs on the page, but I feel like it is meant to be read and interpreted more like poetical lines, I guess, which may be a theme in these videos because I've been trying to read some poetry and I don't understand it very well yet because I'm not very well educated in poetry anymore. However, while I didn't understand a lot of what is in this, I did really enjoy it. It is meant to be kind of a journey that Sofia and her brother go on to explain their lives, to tell their story through monsters. And this setup, this structure, reminded me a lot of a short story by Samatar called The Ogres of East Africa. That story is very much like encyclopedia entries on different ogres through which the overall story and the theme is developed. And I love that story, and I think that this collection or book does something very similar, but in a more opaque and just disjointed way, I guess, which sounds bad, but I don't think it is. But there would just be a line on a page that hit me like it was suddenly relevant. It spoke some sort of truth, or it was just beautifully phrased, and it was all worth it for those. So it's really kind of a prose poem or an anecdote or something for every type of monster talked about, and there is an illustration for every one by Del Samatar. It's just beautiful. The illustrations are great, and the journey it kind of took me on was really good. On the whole, I think I could say that it's asking questions like, what is a monster? What does monstrous mean? Is a monster a terrible thing from nightmares, or is it just the foreigner, the other? Both of these authors are biracial, and so it makes sense, you know, this kind of analogy with monsters to explain their story of being biracial and growing up in America like that. Beyond that, I'm not sure that I have understood enough, but if you've read it, let me know what you think. Next up is this really great book called The Secret Lives of Color by Kassia St. Clair. I had originally bought this for my mom for her last birthday, and she really enjoyed it, and I'm borrowing it back in order to read it for myself. This isn't a comprehensive history of colors or anything like that, but I think it's kind of a collection of journal or newspaper articles that St. Clair wrote about or highlighting different colors and anecdotes, their histories, how the dyes or pigments were made in the old days and stuff, and it's fascinating. There are 75 shades, dyes, and hues in this, and they're all organized basically by color family. You can kind of see the colors on the side there. I just thought every single one was fascinating. I learned all these little tidbits. A lot of this is about the dyes and pigments and stuff used in cloth making, in the fashion industry and stuff, and in painting, especially whether colors could stand up well in different types of paints, oil-based or not. And I never really thought about that. I never really thought about the chemistry of the different colors, especially in the old days before it was discovered how to chemically produce a lot of these. I'd actually read a little bit about the explosion of vibrant colors in the Victorian age when I read How to Be a Victorian by Ruth Goodman, because apparently that was the time period when they started synthetically producing a lot of great colors using coal tar, and that just opened all new doors for really rich and vibrant and color-fast hues and stuff. There's some really garish looking Victorian gowns because they were all into using the colors, but I think to a modern eye it's a bit much. So that was pretty much the only thing that I knew about dyes and stuff before I started reading this, but that is mentioned in here, and as well as a bunch of other things. So as you can tell, I'm very enthusiastic about it. I really hope that the author will write more. I'm sure there are so many more colors that she could talk about, but if she does something similar for a completely different topic, I would also pick that up in a heartbeat. The Grand Design by Stephen Hawking and Leonard Mlodinow. This is a popular science book which attempts to make quantum theory or M theory accessible to the general audience. I think the marketing for this book and the introduction by the authors themselves kind of pitches the whole thing as, we're going to explain not only how the universe works, but why the universe exists without invoking God. It's basically two very well-known atheists who want to sort of have the science versus religion conversation, but actually they don't talk about that very much. The bulk of it is actually just explaining the fundamental concepts of science and physics, the major highlights of history, all building up to quantum theory or M theory, which is the end all, the be all, or something like that of physics. And that was okay. I have read all of this many times over in other popular science books, and on the whole, I would say this is not the best one that I've read or the most accessible. If you want something similar to this that it doesn't even get into the hairy religion stuff, then I would just point you in the direction of Neil deGrasse Tyson or something like that. So it wasn't a bad book. I just don't think it really did what it's marketed as, and what it does do is not new to me, which is subjective. It will be very new to other readers. But I have to say, as soon as I realized that a lot of this was going to be the "we don't need God, we can explain it all with science" thing, I checked out mentally a bit. I'm not a religious person. I'm almost entirely agnostic these days, but I don't have any interest in this science versus religion debate. I know there are many scientists out there who gladly do their work while still maintaining religious belief very happily and very successfully, so I don't think there's really a thing to talk about there. So I know that's just me, take it with a grain of salt, but it was okay. The fourth one is Antipodes Death by Nancy Atherton, which is the first book in a long-running cozy mystery series. This was recommended to me by my friend Chris, who I think listened to the first couple of them on audio and recommended that experience. I couldn't get them on audio, so I just got the first one in paperback to see what I thought about it. And it was fun. It was definitely a cozy mystery. It didn't quite strike me the same way that I think it struck my friend, however. So this is about a woman whose mother told her these wonderful stories about Aunt Dimity when she was a child. Aunt Dimity, who goes on all these adventures, and even the smallest things that happen to her get spun into these delightful bedtime stories. And then when she grows up, her mother passes away very suddenly. This woman is broke, she's mostly at loose ends, doesn't have any prospects, and then she gets the message that Aunt Dimity has died, and she needs to come in to hear about this legacy that she's been left. Only thing is, she thought that Aunt Dimity was a fictional character that her mother made up, and not a real person. But she is a real person. What I did not expect is that this actually turns into a ghost story. It's not a murder investigation. There's nothing like that. But it is this woman going to find out more about Dimity's past to kind of set some things right, I guess. And in many ways it felt like a setup for the rest of the series because she needs to be in a better place before the adventures can go on, and Aunt Dimity's presence will be felt even though she's dead now. So I liked it. I liked especially the character of Aunt Dimity. What I was not fond of was the love thing, the romance, because the guy, I didn't like him. He came on strong, way too strong. He's actually called out for it, but then it's all okay. And it was so predictable. It was so predictable, and I didn't like him very much. I felt like a lot of it was vaguely inappropriate. I don't know, which is the only thing keeping me back from continue with the series, because I just don't know if I really want to read more about that relationship, even though I want a lot more Aunt Dimity. If anybody has opinions on this, do let me know, because my library has, I think, all the other ones in the series, and I can certainly keep reading if I want to. I may have to be convinced a little bit of that though. And then the last one to talk about very quickly is Lumberjanes Volume 8, which is Stone Cold. This one is written by, who's it written by? Shannon Waters and Kat Leyh, as usual, illustrated by Carey Pietsch. Did I talk about this recently? Very abrupt jump cut because I got very confused. I thought I had already talked about this volume, and apparently I haven't. I don't know, I'm very confused, but let's continue on. In this one, our characters have to rescue some other campmates who are in a different cabin. They've been turned to stone, supposedly by a Gorgon, only when they actually find the Gorgon, she's like, no, I would never do that. I'm not that rude. She's a great character, by the way. I really hope she comes back. This also kind of calls back to an earlier adventure when one of the girls at camp named Diane was introduced. She is actually the goddess and was kind of a jerk, but she becomes much better in this one. It's kind of crazy to explain. When I actually say it out loud, it sounds bizarre, but that is pretty much Lumberjanes. It's nothing but crazy adventures. I don't think this is my favorite volume ever. I like the story. I continue to like the direction that the series is going in. I liked it more than the bonus tracks volume that I hauled recently as well, because I'm really enjoying the longer story arcs. But I will say, again, the same thing that I said in that book haul, which is Jo is pretty much the only character who doesn't get talked about that much. And that was kind of odd because I think that she actually played a pretty big role in the first story where Diane was introduced. I need more Jo. That's all there is to it. And that's the first batch of 5 that I needed to talk about. I should get through the other 4 batches pretty soon. I'm just trying to get back into a regular filming schedule in May now that the craziness of April is over with. So let me know if you have read any of these, or if you want to, leave me a comment down below, and I will talk to you again very soon. And until then, bye.